The B-17 that flew home with its nose completely gone. The incredible story of All-American. During World War II, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress earned its legendary reputation for being nearly indestructible. These bombers could take enormous amounts of damage and still bring their crews home safely. But one incident stands above all others as the most unbelievable example of the B-17's toughness: the story of a bomber that flew home with its entire nose section destroyed. This is the remarkable tale of survival against impossible odds. A routine training flight. On a clear day in February 1943, several B-17 bombers took off from their base in Tunisia, North Africa. The mission wasn't a combat operation, but a routine training flight. The crews were practicing formation flying, an essential skill for survival during bombing missions. Flying in tight formation provided mutual protection, as the bombers could defend each other with their combined firepower. Among the aircraft in the formation was a B-17 that would soon become famous, though its crew had no idea what was about to happen. The sky was blue, visibility was excellent, and everything seemed perfect for a training exercise. The young pilots were concentrating on maintaining their positions in the formation, staying close, but not too close to the other aircraft. The collision. Without warning, disaster struck. A German fighter plane, possibly unnoticed by the formation, attacked from an unexpected angle. In the confusion of evasive maneuvers, two B-17s accidentally collided in midair. The impact was catastrophic. One B-17 struck another directly on the nose section. The collision was so violent that it completely sheared off the front of one bomber. The plexiglass nose cone, the bombardier station, the navigator's position, and part of the forward fuselage were simply torn away. It was as if a giant knife had sliced through the aircraft. The plane that had been hit should have broken apart immediately. Everyone watching expected to see it spiral out of control and crash. The laws of aerodynamics suggested this aircraft could not possibly continue flying. Yet incredibly, impossibly, it stayed in the air. Assessing the damage. Inside the damaged bomber, the crew was in shock. The bombardier and navigator, who had been stationed in the nose section, were gone, lost in the collision. The rest of the crew, seated further back in the aircraft, had survived the impact but faced a nightmarish situation. Where the nose of the aircraft should have been, there was now just empty air. The pilots could see straight out the front of the plane, as if looking through a giant hole. Wind screamed through the opening at over 200 miles per hour. Papers, equipment, and anything not secured flew out into the sky. The noise was deafening. The pilots quickly assessed their situation. They had lost two crew members. The aircraft was severely damaged, but the engines were still running and he still had control. The question was, could they make it back to base or should they bail out immediately? The decision to fly home. The pilot made a bold decision. Despite the catastrophic damage, he would attempt to fly the crippled bomber back to base. This decision was based on several factors. First, the engines were all still functioning. Second, the control surfaces seemed to be responding. Third, bailing out over enemy territory meant certain capture or death. But flying a B-17 with no nose section was something no one had ever attempted before. The nose provided crucial aerodynamic stability. Without it, the plane should have been unflyable. The missing section also meant tremendous drag, making the aircraft much harder to control and less efficient. The co-pilot helped manage the engine controls, while the pilot fought with the wheel and rudder pedals. Every movement had to be calculated and gentle. Too much force in any direction could cause the damaged aircraft to spin out of control. It was like trying to drive a car with half the body missing at highway speeds. Fighting the elements. The open nose exposed the crew to brutal conditions. The temperature at their flying altitude was well below freezing. The wind chill made it even worse. Crew members in the forward sections were blasted by Arctic winds that made breathing difficult and turned their hands numb within minutes. Oxygen was another critical problem. At high altitude, humans need supplemental oxygen to survive. The destroyed nose section meant the aircraft's oxygen system was damaged. The crew had to rely on emergency oxygen bottles, which had limited supply. If they ran out before reaching base, they would lose consciousness and die. The wind noise was so loud that communication between crew members was nearly impossible, even using the intercom system. Hand signals and written notes became their primary means of communication. Every crew member had to work together, anticipating each other's needs without being able to talk. Maintaining altitude and speed. The missing nose created enormous aerodynamic drag. It was like trying to fly while pushing against a brick wall. The engines, running at maximum power, struggled to maintain altitude and airspeed. The pilot had to carefully balance speed with control. Too slow and they would stall and crash. Too fast and the structural stress might tear the aircraft apart. Fuel consumption was much higher than normal due to the drag. The fuel engineer constantly monitored the fuel gauges, calculating whether they had enough to reach base. It would be close, very close. They couldn't afford any detours or course corrections. They had to fly the most direct route possible. Other aircraft in the formation stayed close, providing moral support, and ready to report if the damaged bomber went down. The other pilots couldn't believe what they were seeing. A B-17 flying without a nose was something from a nightmare, yet there it was, somehow staying in the air. The long flight home. Minutes felt like hours as the crippled bomber limped toward safety. Every minute that passed was a small victory. Every mile covered brought them closer to base. But the strain on the aircraft and crew was enormous. Metal creaked and groaned under stresses it was never designed to handle. The pilot's arms ached from fighting the controls. He couldn't relax for even a second. The slightest inattention could doom them all. The co-pilot helped as much as possible, but the primary burden fell on the pilot's shoulders. He had 9 lives in his hands, and he was determined to save them all. Behind the pilots, the rest of the crew prepared for emergency landing procedures. They secured everything that could move, put on crash helmets, and assumed positions that would give them the best chance of survival if the landing went wrong. Medical kits were ready for immediate use. Everyone knew the landing would be the most dangerous moment of all. Approaching the base. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the base appeared on the horizon. The pilot radioed ahead to inform the tower of their situation. Emergency crews rushed to prepare. Fire trucks and ambulances lined the runway. Everyone on the base came out to watch, unable to believe the reports of a B-17 flying without its nose. The pilot lowered the landing gear, holding his breath as the mechanism operated. If the gear failed to deploy properly, they would have to belly land, which could be catastrophic given the condition of the aircraft. But the gear locked into place, one more obstacle overcome. He lined up for final approach, compensating for the unusual handling characteristics of the noseless bomber. The aircraft fought him every inch of the way. The co-pilot called out altitudes and speeds. The runway grew larger in their view. The landing. The damaged B-17 touched down hard but successfully. The pilot applied the brakes carefully, not wanting to put too much stress on the damaged structure. The bomber rolled down the runway, slowing gradually, and finally came to a complete stop. Emergency crews rushed to the aircraft. The surviving crew members climbed out, exhausted, traumatized, but alive. 7 men had survived a flight that should have been impossible. 2 had been lost in the collision, a tragic sacrifice. But the pilot's skill and courage had saved the others. The aftermath and legacy. The damaged B-17 was examined by engineers and aviation experts. They were astonished that it had flown at all, let alone made it all the way back to base. Photographs of the noseless bomber were taken and widely circulated. The images seemed impossible, like something from science fiction rather than reality. The story spread rapidly among Allied air crews. It became a legend that reinforced the B-17's reputation as the toughest bomber ever built. Pilots and crews gained confidence, knowing that their aircraft could sustain almost unimaginable damage and still bring them home. The pilot received recognition for his exceptional airmanship and bravery. His decision to attempt the flight home and his skill in actually accomplishing it saved 7 lives. He had turned what should have been a total disaster into an incredible survival story. A testament to engineering and courage. The story of the B-17 that flew home without its nose stands as a testament to both brilliant engineering and human courage. The designers at Boeing had created an aircraft tough enough to survive catastrophic damage, but it took a skilled, brave pilot to prove just how tough it really was. This incredible incident reminds us that during World War II, miracles happened regularly in the skies. Young men faced impossible situations and somehow found ways to survive. The combination of excellent aircraft design, thorough training, and sheer determination created legends that still inspire us today. The noseless B-17 earned its place in aviation history as one of the most remarkable survival stories ever recorded.